Krishna. Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon. Just so. So we're going to read Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, entitled Purusha Shukta Confirmed. Text 21, Chapter 6, Canto 2 of Srimad Bhagavatam. And today's April 17th, 2020. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayamudhirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Preshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya. Bhagavat Yutamashloki Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Text 21. We can start with the words responsibly. Sriti Vichakrame Vishvan Shashana Nashane Ubhe Yad Avidya Cha Vidya Cha Purushas Tupayashrayam Sriti Vichakrame Vishvam Shashana Nashane Ube Yada Vidya Cha Purushas Tupayashrayam Sriti Vichakrame Vishvam Shashana Nashane Ube Yada Vidya Cha Purushas Tupayashrayam Sriti Vichakrame Vishvam Shashana Nashane Ube Yada Vidya Cha Purushas Tupayashrayam. If anyone else would like to chant the verse.
Shriti Vikrame Vishwan
Sriti Vichakrame Vishvam
Shashana Ube
Shashana Ube
Yada Vidya Cha
Yada Vidya Cha
Purushastu Vyayashraya
Purushastu Vyayashraya. Would anyone on internet like to chant the verse?
Shriti Vichakrame Vishvan
Sriti Vichakrame Vishvan
Shashana Nashane Ubhe
Shashana Nashane Ube
Yada Vidya Cha
Yada Vidya Cha
Purushastu Vayashraya
Purushas Tupayashraya. Hare Krishna. Would anyone else like to chant?
Shriti Vichakram Me Vishvan
Sriti Vichakame Vishvan
Shashanana Shane Ube
Sarashanasane Ube
Yada Vidya Cha Vidya Cha
Yada Vidya Cha Vidya Cha
Purushastu Vayashraya
Purushastu Vayashraya. Sriti,
Shriti,
the destination of the living entities.
destination of the living entities.
Vichakrame,
Vichakrame,
exists comprehensively.
exists comprehensively.
Vishvan,
Vishvan,
the all-pervading personality of Godhead.
the all-pervading personality of God.
Shashana,
Shashana,
activities of lording it over.
activities of lording it over.
Anasane,
Anasana,
activities in devotional service.
activities in devotional service.
Ubhe,
Ubhe,
both.
both.
Yat,
Yat,
what is.
what is.
Avidya,
Avidya,
nescience.
nation,
Cha, as well as.
as
Vidya, factual knowledge.
factual knowledge.
Cha, and Purusha,
Purusha,
the supreme person.
the supreme person.
Two, but Ubhaya,
Ubhaya,
for both of them.
for both of them.
Ashraya,
Ashrayam,
the master.
the master.
Translation. By his energies, the all-pervading personality of Godhead is thus comprehensively the master in the activities of controlling and in devotional service. He is the ultimate master of both nescience and factual knowledge of all situations. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The word Vishvan is significant in this verse. One who travels perfectly in every field of activity is called the Purusha or Kshetriya. These two terms, Kshetriya and Purusha, are equally applicable to both the individual self and the Supreme Self, the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 13.3, the matter is explained as follows. Kshetrayam chapi mam vidi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetra gyayor gyanam yatat gyanam matam mama. Kshetra means the place, and one who knows the place is called the kshetragya. The individual self knows about his limited field of activities, but the Supreme Self, the Lord, knows about the unlimited field of activities. The individual soul knows about his own thinking, feeling, and willing activities, but the SuperSoul, or the Paramatma, the Supreme Controller, being present everywhere, knows everyone's thinking, feeling, and willing activities, and as such, the individual living entity is the minute master of his personal affairs, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master of everyone's affairs, past, present, and future, Vedaham, Samati, Dani, etc. Only the ignorant person does not know this difference between the Lord and the living entities. The living entities are as distinguished. The living entities, as distinguished from incognizant matter, may be qualitatively equal to the Lord in cognizance, but the living entity can never be equal to the Lord in full knowledge of past, present, and future. And because the living entity is partially cognizant, he is therefore sometimes forgetful of his own identity. This forgetfulness is specifically manifested in the field of the Ekapad Vibhuti of the Lord, or in the material world, but in the Tripad Vibhuti field of activities, or in the spiritual world, there is no forgetfulness by the living entities who are free from all kinds of contaminations resulting from the forgetful state of existence. The material body is the symbol of the gross and subtle form of forgetfulness. Therefore, the whole atmosphere of the material world is called avidya, or nescience, whereas the whole atmosphere of the spiritual world is called vidya, or full of knowledge. There are different stages of avidya, and they are called dharma, artha, and moksha. The idea of moksha, or liberation, held by the monist in the matter of oneness of the living entity and the Lord by ultimate merging in one, is also the last stage of materialism or forgetfulness. Knowledge of the qualitative oneness of the self and superself is partial knowledge and ignorance also, because there is no knowledge of quantitative difference as explained above. The individual self can never be equal to the Lord in cognizance, otherwise he could not be placed in the state of forgetfulness. So, because there is a stage of forgetfulness of the individual selves, or the living entities, there is always a gulf of difference between the Lord and the living entity as between the part and the whole. The part is never equal to the whole, so the conception of 100% equality of the living being with the Lord is also nescience. In the field of nescience, activities are directed toward lording it over the creation. In the material world, therefore, everyone is engaged in acquiring material opulence to lord it over the material world. Therefore, there is always clash and frustration, which are the symptoms of nescience. But in the field of knowledge, there is devotional service to the Lord, bhakti. Therefore, there is no chance of being contaminated by the influence of nescience or forgetfulness, avidya, in the liberated stage of devotional activities. The Lord is thus the proprietor of the fields both of nescience and of cognition, and it remains the choice of the living entity to exist in either of the above regions. Hare Krishna. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 21. Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshundilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Bhagadamayam Darati Swampadanti Pandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapanakalam Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagnalalita Shri Vishakanditam Stram Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Panchakalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Ti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Desha Tarine. Sriti Vichakrame Vishvan Shashanana Shane Ube Yada Vidya Cha Vidya Cha Purushash Tubayashraya. By his energies, the all-pervading personality of Godhead is thus comprehensively the master in the activities of controlling and in devotional service. He is the ultimate master of both nescience and factual knowledge of all situations. Hare Krishna. Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, Ham Sarvasya Prabhava Mata Sarvam Pravartate Iti Matva Vajantimam Buddha Bhava Samnavita. Krishna says he is the source of all material and spiritual energies, all material and spiritual worlds. So here it's described. So activities of control, that refers to the Ekapad Vibhuti, that is the material energy, where the living entities, that's us, the living entities, where Ishvaro Ham, Aham Bhogi, Soham Balavan Sukhi, the idea, the mentality is, I'm the enjoyer, I'm the controller, and I will control the material energy and pursue my agenda based on misidentification of who I am. Either concentrated materialism, satisfying the senses of the body, or extended material conception in the sense of my family, my community, my nation, my species. And it's still based on the body, right? What makes this particular community, family, race, football team, species, especially special, is because it's connected with my body. It's connected with my body. And so that's why I'll fight for my nation, or like that, my species, my gender, like that. And it's about this, the center is my body. Okay. So there's concentrated and extended material conception. And so that's all being controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the sphere of his control, Krishna reciprocates with our desires, either through his material energies or spiritual energies. The recommendation, the emphasis here is we get to choose. Like we're going to be taking shelter of God's energy, either his internal energy or his external energy. It's described obeisances, or dandavats. Dandavats is where we we completely lay down prostrated obeisances. So it's described, Mityu Sarva Harastraham, Krishna says, I am all devouring death. So everyone offers dandavats, everyone offers prostrated obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, either voluntarily or involuntarily at the time of death. Kalos me, pravida lokakshaya, a form of God, a form of Krishna is death. So ultimately, through the force of time, we're going to offer prostrated obeisances. Okay, so now, of course, there's, popular non-theistic or atheistic philosophies that no, there is no controller. There is no controller. Everything's happening by random chance, which is just like, let's say we're walking in town, or walking in a city, and with traffic lights, and it's just like, and so like maybe a child just thinks everything's just happening automatically, everything. But no, an adult with intelligence can see things aren't just happening automatically. That there's a whole system, and that's how the electricity comes through, and that's how the bus schedule is reasonably on time, and that's how things get cleaned. That there's organizing intelligence behind everything. And so it's childish to think that behind the rotation of the planets, the veins of a leaf, behind all of these structures, which are far more sophisticated and at such a higher level of organization than, let's say, this laptop computer. And behind this laptop computer, we naturally understand it didn't just happen by random chance that the wind blew and the laptop. No, there's an intelligence behind the design, the engineering. So it makes logical sense that behind the veins of the leaf and the rotation of the planets, there's a much greater intelligence than that behind the laptop computer. Sometimes it is described, this idea of a controller or a supreme. Well, they'll go psychological, they'll go Freudian, like, well, that's because you have a need for a father figure. And so you invent this idea of like the supreme father. And that's just because of your psychological, emotional need for a father figure. Okay. I mean, we hear this argument sometimes. Now, one thing, if we think about need, if we think about, let's say, on the physical platform, right? We notice physically we need water, and we can notice that water exists. Physically, we need air. And if we look around, we'll see, oh, air exists. So just the fact that there is a need does not indicate that the object being needed doesn't exist. In fact, it tends to indicate just the opposite. Okay, so just torpedo different atheistic arguments. And so, okay, so it makes sense that there's like a higher intelligence, guiding the structures of the universe. And it's described in the Bhagavatam, Vedanti Tata Avidas Tattvam Yajganamadvayam Brahmeti Paramatmiti Bhagavati Shabhite. So primarily there's three aspects to the absolute God, supreme, however one call it. There's three aspects. And it's described that learned transcendentalists realize the absolute in three phases: as Brahman, which is the oneness of all energies, and there's truth to that. It's just not the complete full truth. And that's what's described here in this verse in purport. And then there's a facet of God realization. Like we realize God according to our perspective, according to our consciousness. Prabhupada sometimes gives the example, like if we're driving along and in the distance, there's like, maybe a hill or a mountain and it's kind of cloudy, but we can tell, oh, that's a town or that's a city. All right, so that's according to our perspective, according to our closeness, we have some understanding. Then as we get closer, we can go, yeah, it's not just this muddle of stuff. We can see, there's a building. That must be at least 20 stories high, and I can see there are people there as we get closer. And then let's say we actually drive up through the winding roads into the town, into the mountain. Then we might see it's like, it's not just some indistinct people and buildings. Oh, this is the post office, and there's Michael Smith, and there's Mary Jones, and it's very personal. Okay, so similarly with the absolute. Okay, there's the idea of, from a relatively distant perspective, everything is the white light, and as we develop a more intimate relationship, then there's relationship with Paramatma, SuperSoul, and the idea, and this is such a significant point. So Prabhupada quotes a verse. There's many verses in Bhagavad Gita indicating where Krishna, Bhagavan, Shama Sundar, Krishna, he expands. He is the super soul in the heart of all living entities. Prabhupada quotes one of those verses here from the 13th chapter. In the 15th chapter, of Bhagavad Gita, it's described, Sarvasti Cham Vidisami Sanivisto, Krishna says, I am the super soul in the heart of all living entities. From me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Madas, Mijerganamabo, Anamcha, Ishvara, Sarvatanam, Videshar, Drinatishti, Brahmayan, Sarvabhutani, Yanchuridani, Maya. I am the super soul in the heart of all living entities. So you might call it a second aspect of the absolute, a second aspect of God. He's sitting right next, a full expansion of God is sitting right next to us in our heart. In fact, even fuller. And antarasta, paramanucha antarastam, that super soul, it's called this, we are the Atma. And then the super soul, it's an expansion of God sitting right next to us. It's called the Paramatma. Paramatma. Para means supreme. And so, so the goal of all yoga system is to meditate on the Paramatma in the heart, whatever, because the source book of yoga, that's Bhagavad Gita, that's Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedeshta Savera Hamadevacham. Srila Vyasadeva compiled all the Vedas, and then in the maturity of his literary career, and Vyasadeva is a literary incarnation of Krishna, God himself, he compiled the Bhagavatam. Dharma Projita Koitvitra Parmonimat Saranam Satam Vejam Astavam Vat Vejam Vastavam Achravastu Shivadam Tapochan Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mamuni Kritikim Vagpir Ishvara Sadya Vija Bhavujate Vakriti Bishu Shishupis Takshana. That this is described, that this Bhagavad Purana rejects anything in the name of religion or yoga that's based on any materialistic desire, and it propounds the highest truth. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion, for for the benefit, for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. Threefold miseries refers to miseries coming from the body and mind, mental torment, disease, miseries coming from other living entities, miseries coming from natural disturbances. This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by Srila Vyasadeva in the maturity of his career is sufficient in itself for self-realization and God realization. And the Bhagavatam asks rhetorically, what need is there for any other scripture? As soon as one submissively and attentively hears this Bhagavatam, then the Supreme Lord is manifest within his heart. The Supreme Lord as SuperSoul is always in our heart, but we tend to be sleeping to that reality. So the idea of yoga, whether it's the Hatha Yoga or the Raja Yoga or the Jnana Yoga or the Karma, the idea of all yoga is to control the mind and senses. And then the yogi meditates on what? Meditates on the great void. No, it doesn't say that anywhere. That's just a concoction. Meditates on the flame of the candle. No, where does it say that? This is just, no, I'm being, for those who may not know me, I'm being facetious. I have a tendency to be sarcastic. Okay, might shock some of you. Okay, so according to the sources of yoga, the yogi controls the mind and then is peaceful enough internally to meditate on the Paramatma in the heart. And that's very blissful, to meditate on the Paramatma, and specifically described in the Yoga Shastras, that the yogi meditates on the form of the Paramatma, on Vaikuntha Lila, on Gokula Lila, on the pastimes of the Paramatma. Just like we're reading pastimes between Brahma and Narada Muni. A few nights ago, we read pastimes with Krishna and the cowherd boys. Millions, there's hundreds, thousands, actually millions of pastimes. We have direct access to hundreds of pastimes of Krishna and his pure devotees. So the yogi meditates on the Paramatma, the name, the form, the qualities, the activities. And that meditation, even a drop of such true meditation like that, is more blissful, more satisfying by trillions of times than any material pleasure we can imagine. And then the yogi, in that SuperSoul realization, the yogi then develops a natural affection and desire. I want to serve the Supreme Person who's situated in my heart, right next to me. And then that leads to bhakti yoga. That leads to the most complete aspect of God realization, Bhagavan realization, Krishna consciousness. So typically, traditionally, that yogic process to come to that point through the different varnas and ashrams and through Brahman realization, and then to the yogi meditating on SuperSoul, coming to bhakti, and then to from Shantaras to Dasyaras. Generally that takes, if one's like really serious, like 60,000 years. And I'm not saying that just to be funny. So that's why it's described, it's not really practical for this age. Who's gonna live for 60,000 years? And if we do, what are we doing with our time? So Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Satyatam Kirta Yanto Mam Yatantascha Tritavrata Yatantascha Chamam Nitya Yuktu Pasate. Krishna describes the devotees, the true Mahatmas are always chanting, like always Satyatam Kirta Yanto Mam. They're always engaged in kirtan and glorifying my name. And that's there in any, because this bhakti yoga, it's nothing sectarian, right? Like the essence of the teachings of Jesus, the essence of the teachings of the Old Testament, it's all about bhakti. The essence of the Quran is bhakti, okay? And so Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada, they're giving us, Prabhupada sometimes gives the analogy, instead of climbing 3,000 flights of steps, here's a quick elevator. And that's this chanting, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And so a new bhakta or bhaktin chanting Hare Krishna has more complete realization of the absolute of God than that yogi meditating for hundreds of thousands of lifetimes. It's actually described. That's why Shukadeva Goswami, in describing the cowherd boys, Itam Satam Brahmasakana Bhutya Dasyam Gatanam Paradayatena Mayashutanam Naradara Kena Sakam Bijara Punya Bunja. He describes that the cowherd boys, they're wrestling with Krishna, and they're playing keep away with Krishna, and they're imitating the frogs and frolicking with Krishna and playing games. They don't seem very serious at all, right? But Sukadeva Goswami is saying, like, they are immersed, they're fully realized in the goal of all philosophical conjecture, in the goal of all mystic yoga. And like these residents of Vrindavan, they've achieved it. They've achieved it, that pure devotional service. And so I quoted that second verse from Bhagavatam, starting Dharma Pojita Kortavatra. So the Bhagavatam rejects any materialistic motivated, like, and then it's described here as material motivations include dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And Prabhupada so wonderfully describes how even the desire for moksha, liberation, merging into the oneness of everything, there's also ignorance there. I mean, there's something wonderful about it, because such a soul is desiring to rise above gross material lust and greed and things like that. But there's still ignorance there, because there's understanding of the spiritual foundation of everything, nice. At the same time, there's not understanding of that eternal difference, the eternal personal difference between the spirit soul, between the gold ring and the gold mine. Right? It's kind of like, and this is a possible pitfall for those yogis. They'll connect with the super soul in the heart, and they'll think, I am the super soul. I am that supreme beautiful person. Rather than realizing, that's the super soul sitting right next to me. And I'm the jiva soul. Let me serve humbly with worshipful devotion. Okay? And then that's the perfection of the living entity. To Mamevam Shujiva, okay, Jiva Buddha Sanatana, Manasastini Jnani Prakritistani Karshati. That Krishna says the living entities, that's us, Jiva, are my eternally fragmented parts. Eternally. So it's not like when we achieve enlightenment, we realize we're God. Okay, so we can just realize the abject stupidity of such a point of view. Because, I'm just God, I haven't realized it yet, but if I meditate a little more. So how did God fall into illusion? Okay, it's an impossibility, right? So, because that would mean the power of illusion is greater than the power of God. So then illusion becomes the absolute, okay? So no. So yeah, we're parts and parcels of God. We're spiritual sparks, just as the sun rays are parts and parcels of the sun. And we're Natvevaham Jatuna Samnatvam Nameja Nanipana Chevina Bhavishima Sarveda Evatakram. And we're eternally distinct persons. And Krishna is an eternally distinct person. And our role, our bliss, our fulfillment is to surrender our separatist agendas and serve Krishna with love and devotion. And we remain eternal persons, and as we've discussed in some recent discussions, we bridge that separation through loving devotional service. We learn how to do loving devotional service through agreeing to be guided by someone who's a master at it, just like in any field. We'll take guidance if we want to learn a musical instrument or a sport or an academic subject. We take guidance from someone who has a master's or a PhD. That's the idea, right? So we're very fortunate to have our Srila Prabhupada. He's a master at serving Krishna with love and devotion. And he shows us how to do it. There's no speculation there. And as we do that, our natural personality, our spiritual personality, not the mask of material personality, our spiritual personality blossoms. And in that spiritual and devotional personality, there's never stagnation, it's never hackneyed, and it's never stereotyped. In one sense, like this last night, we had a coach training meeting, principles and practices of transformative coaching. And I'm always enlivened by this coach training group. And they, really anything we do in any of the seminars or the coaching or the coach training, any technique, process, principle, it's all meant to support people, starting with ourselves, to connect with the highest guidance within. We use that term. We borrow that term from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And the highest guidance with that means the SuperSoul. That means the Paramatma. Antaryami, different names for the SuperSoul. In material conditioned life, there will tend to be static between me, just like the radio station's not coming through clear. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, he says to Arjuna, listen to the SuperSoul in the heart. Listen to the SuperSoul in the heart, and you'll easily cross beyond the miseries of the ocean of material existence. But if you're listening to false ego, then it's a perpetual, painful struggle. Now, everyone's struggling. Like, if I think of those who've given themselves to devotional service, they're struggling too. As far as I'm aware, everyone's struggling. It's an important point. So what's the difference? But there's a difference, because there's a distinction between a futile, empty, hollow, meaningless struggle and a struggle for that which is worthwhile in a solid, enduring, eternal sense. So the struggle to control our mind and senses and false ego, to engage in devotional service, that's a struggle that's eternally enriching and beneficial for the soul. We say, it's a struggle, I don't want to do it. Well, we're not going to get away from struggle. That's the nature of this world. We're going to struggle. To what extent are we giving our struggle to that which is eternally valuable and worthwhile? And that's the path of bhakti. That's the path of bhakti. So, to connect with that highest guidance within, to connect with SuperSoul, to clear the static, whatever metaphor we're going to use, cleanse the dust or the dirt or the mud from the diamond of the soul, the diamond of the heart. Yes. So, and then our spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada, the pure devotee spiritual master, and someone is not a spiritual master unless they're a pure devotee of Krishna. Just like we gave, yoga is about connecting with Krishna in the heart. It's not David Wolf's opinion. That's what the yoga shastras say. Yeah. But I went on the internet and I saw something about yoga, and that says, time is short and we want to get to the essence of things. So we want to get to the actual meaning, the actual essence, and not be distorted not be distracted and waste time with fluff and bluff. So, Ye Krishna Tattva Say Guru Hai. So, a true spiritual master, according to the Vedas, is one who is fully conversant and realized in the science of Krishna. So, a pure devotee spiritual master is the external representation of SuperSoul. Because, I don't have that connection with SuperSoul. I got all, because we got, we all hear voices inside. We all have that experience. We all hear voices inside. And so through this process, chanting Hare Krishna, pulling the weeds from the garden of the heart. So much of what we do in Safatod is about the weed pulling part of the science of bhakti, to use the garden analogy. Weed pulling and watering. Okay, so hearing the vibration, hearing the instruction from Srila Prabhupada, that is the super soul in the heart. And if we want to make distinctions more and more as we go, what is my conditioned, sneaky mind? What is my false ego? And what's actual, the guidance from super soul, Paramatma? And we can confirm that by hearing from the external representation of super soul, Srila Prabhupada. So such a rich purport here, and Prabhupada makes the point that, well, he says the material body is the symbol of the gross and subtle form of forgetfulness. So what's the proof that I'm not particularly serious about devotional service? Is I got this material body. This is the proof. This is an embodiment of ignorance. Okay, we don't want to just like lament about it, because we can utilize the temporary in the service of the eternal. We can utilize the relative in the service of the absolute, and that's yukta vairagya. That's bhakti. And Prabhupada goes on. Therefore, the whole atmosphere of the material world is called avidya, or nescience, whereas the whole atmosphere of the spiritual world is called vidya, or full knowledge. So everything in material existence is permeated by nescience. Within that nescience, within that ignorance, okay, there are some things that are relatively more in sattva, goodness, more rajas, or more tamasic. But it's all within the framework, it's all within the container. This whole world is built, it's based on ignorance. It's based on willful forgetfulness of who I am as an eternal spirit soul and an eternal servant of Krishna. And so we're endeavoring for transcendence to that forgetfulness. Sure, cultivating sattvic worldview, sattvic habits about cleanliness, about diet, sattvic habits about communication. That's so much what we endeavor to do in sattvic coach training and seminars. To the extent that we develop sattvic habits, we'll be supporting ourselves and others to realize who we are as eternal spirit souls. So like those sattvic consciousness habits, it's not the goal. It's not the goal. At the same time, cultivating sattvic principles of life and relating and thinking, that's a strong foundation to achieve the goal of transcendence. All right, so this verse reads, Sweti vichakrame vishvan shashanana shaneuve yada vidya cha pushash tuvayashraya. By his energies, the all-pervading personality of Godhead is thus comprehensively the master in the activities of controlling and in devotional service. He is the ultimate master of both nescience and factual knowledge of all situations. Hare Krishna. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your presence and attention. I welcome at this time if someone would like to share comments or questions. Eze.
Yes, thanks so much for class, David. I really liked the analogy that you gave about the child who's like, wow, all these things are happening randomly. That's so nice that everything happens randomly. And yeah, how that's like childishness. That's just not knowing. Of course, there's some intelligence organizing all of this stuff. It's not random. And I love that example. You've given the analogy of like electricity before and something similar. And this example, like for me, I feel like really hit the point. So I really appreciate that analogy. And I'm wondering if you can repeat the other analogy that you gave about like, so we just call it Father God because there's a need for a father, and then you said something about like if one needs air, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Something like that. Could you repeat that analogy, please?
Okay. Yes. First of all, as far as the child thinks everything's just happening automatically, we'll, as usual, we'll give full credit to Srila Prabhupada for that. Prabhupada uses that analogy, that is like that. So, you know, we borrow from Prabhupada. And then the other one, yeah, well, that's, I was addressing, I was addressing an argument we sometimes hear, and that I sometimes see devotees or aspiring devotees feel intimidated by. The idea that, oh, you believe in God just because you got some psychological, emotional need. So I was just addressing, because, okay, so the logic behind that, the false logic, the logic behind that, like, you have this need for a father figure, and so you invent God. You know, it's not that God created man. No, man created God because man has a need for this father figure, man or woman or like that. So we hear that argument sometimes. And so the axiomatic assumption is that because you have a need, therefore the object of need doesn't exist. I'm just kind of, I'm removing the veil and seeing what's the assumption behind that false argument. Because you have a need, therefore the object of the need doesn't exist. But let's look at it. Is that true? I have a need for air, and air exists. I have a need for water, and water exists. So therefore your argument that God doesn't exist because it's just a concoction of psychological emotional need that is not logically coherent. So we're just casting doubt on that argument. Of course, if we want to play psychology, we can go there. That, like, yeah, I reject the possibility of the existence of God, at least God in personal form, because I have a need, that I want to play God. I mean, if we want to play psychology, I'm ready to go there, you know. But yeah, like, just because I have a need, I want to play God. So any conception of God, I need to tear that down to support my David Wolf God project, and that's pretty warped psychology, David Wolf. Okay, like that. But yeah, and so we're just casting doubt and showing the flaw in that argument that that God doesn't exist because it's just your psychological need, like that. So that's what we did there.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thanks, Ozzy. Thank you. Any other comments or questions about Ramachandra Prabhu? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I never heard that approach to that argument. I really appreciate, like, the last point you mentioned to as a Prabhu.
Yeah.
Because, like, for me, yeah, it's kind of like a typical Mayavadi or impersonal trick that instead of answering personally every single question,
yeah,
they just merge a bunch of questions and you go and deal with it. Like,
yeah.
It's like similar thing. I think it's when they conclude that because God is not good to everyone, there is no God. Like, it's two separate things. Is God good, and does he exist? So, yeah. My question is, I was kind of triggered by when we were speaking about the SuperSoul being the spiritual master is the external manifestation of SuperSoul. So by associating with the spiritual master, we are in touch with Krishna, right? And I was wondering, like Prabhupada, let's say he is in a sense he's not like manifested. So how do we go about that? Like, how do we associate with the SuperSoul if our association with Prabhupada is like hampered by our sense perception, let's say.
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, this Prabhupada emphasizes again and again and again and again and again. Prabhupada emphasizes that the pure devotee, is fully present, fully manifest through Vani, which means through sound vibration, through his instruction. And Prabhupada emphasizes that Vani is it's a much more important way to associate with the spiritual master than Vapu. Vapu means like the physical presence. And Prabhupada does not emphasize Vapu. He emphasizes Vani. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great acharya in our line, he has a poem. He reasons ill who tells that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still and sound. Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread the holy name around. So they asked Prabhupada, who will be your successor when you die? And Prabhupada responded, I will never die. I will live forever in my books. His books, his recordings, his letters, his conversations, his instructions. So in the dedication to his pre-65 Bhagavatam's first canto, Prabhupada dedicated to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, his eternal spiritual master, and Prabhupada wrote, he lives forever by his divine instructions, and his follower lives with him. So we follow Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada's fully present for us. If we follow his instructions, sincerely read his books, have discussions like this, trying to deepen our grasp of the meaning. So that's our connection with SuperSoul. And as we do that, then the static in our heart clears more and more, and then we do get more and more clear internal intuition of the voice of SuperSoul in our heart. And it's always can be confirmed by the instructions from the spiritual master.
Yeah, it kind of triggers like another question, but I think you touched it. But like if let's say I do one, just like the yogis, they sit and meditate, and I want to get in touch with God and ask him something, like how do I get a direct instruction from Prabhupada now? Like let's say I'm in a difficulty and I need that instruction, and like, do I just sit and meditate? I read all these books over again, or?
Prabhupada describes the example of like Bilva Mangala Thakur, and how and Prabhupada says very clearly that Bilva Mangala's spiritual master and the SuperSoul spoke to Bilva Mangala through someone named Chintamani, who was a prostitute that he would visit. So it's a very limiting conception. The idea is to get the instruction, he needs to be sitting within 6 or 8 feet of me, maybe 10 feet, and then he speaks to me. This is like bringing our material conceptions onto into the unlimited spiritual realm. That to get instruction from spiritual master, he needs to be his lungs and this is a Mayavad conception. Because the idea is, you can't have Prabhupada as your spiritual master because he's gone. You need someone physically present like me. You need to hear from my lips, breathing through my lung, because this is spiritual. But the eternal vibration of the pure devotee, that's material. You have no access to it. Real spirituality is hearing me talk 6 feet away. It's bringing complete mundane material conception to spiritual life. So Srila Prabhupada is able to give us guidance and instruction in so many ways that we could brainstorm 20 or 30 ways right here, and then there's another thousands of ways that are inconceivable to us. So through reading his books, hearing his lectures, and discussing with other sincere followers of Prabhupada, we don't need to be in pretending not to know. We don't need to be pretending not to know.
Mm.
If we want to be clear, of course, it's not just like, what do you want from me? You maybe all heard the example of Ishan Das. I heard it directly from Rupanuga Prabhu, who lives down the road, and he was one of Prabhupada's first disciples in 1966. And Ishan had an urge, maybe in 66, very early. He went into Prabhupada, and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I want to serve you. What do you want me to do? And Prabhupada responded, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And Ishan was confused. What do you mean that's not how it works? Prabhupada says, what do you want to do? What do you want to do for my movement? What do you want to do for the Sankirtan movement? How do you want to serve Krishna? So Ishan was taken aback, but he thought about it, and then at some point he said, well, it must have been around 67, because the first clay mridungas came in 67 in San Francisco. So it was maybe later in 67. And Ishan said, well, I really like this mridunga, but these clay mridungas, when you drop them, they crack. And so I want to engineer a mridunga that won't break. So Prabhupada says, so do that. That's your inspiration, do that. And that became the first Balaram Mridunga, the first fiberglass mridunga. So we want to cultivate that mentality. How can I serve you? What do you want from me? Prabhupada, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, Srimati Radharani. We want to cultivate that mentality. And also to know that Prabhupada and Krishna, they're looking at us. How do you want to serve me? How do you want to serve my mission? It's a personal exchange. So yeah, so like our job is to be sincere. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pradipurvagam dadami buddhi yogutam dinamam piyantite. Krishna says, if we're sincere, he'll give us the intelligence to know how to come to him.
So if I get it right, if I get it right, it means that Prabhupada, even when he was physically present, he wasn't like telling everyone what to do. Really, it was like a SuperSoul thing, or
yeah, in maybe less than 0.1% of the time was he like physically telling his followers what to do. Many of his followers, even when he was physically present on the planet, never got one instruction from Prabhupada in that physical form. They never met Prabhupada. They never exchanged. They never received a letter from him. They never talked to him on the telephone. There's hundreds like that. And even of those who had maybe relatively a lot of physical association in 67, well, as years went on, they were hearing from his books, his letters, his instructions. So even when Prabhupada was physically present through November 14th, 1977, maybe less than 0.1% of his guidance was coming through that physical presence. Less than 0.1%. So Prabhupada's fully available. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Simran Shakti.
Hi. Yeah, I am appreciating the thing you mentioned earlier on about our original ecstatic personality coming forth once we are like stepping into bhakti yoga.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm reflecting on my life and my spiritual path, and how when I was in the center and like really working to self-realize in the mystical way, I was feeling like more jaded and less joy and less ecstatic, and actually quite like robotic. And as I've finally come around to bhakti yoga after all of the hatha yoga practicing, I'm starting to feel that sense of like my spiritual personality emerging. Yeah. And so yeah, I'm just having a really like really big breakthrough right now of like appreciation. Yeah.
I'm appreciating your sharing. Thanks for sharing your appreciation and your experience and realizations about your spiritual personality emerging in an accelerated way as you're giving yourself to this bhakti yoga path. And that's what you mentioned about hatha yoga, raja yoga, there's kundalini yoga, there's all sorts of yoga, and they're all described, and they all culminate in bhakti, and you're experiencing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you, Simran Shakti. Hare Krishna. Anandini, did you have a sharing?
Yes, about Srila Prabhupada being present in his teachings.
Yeah.
And like being with a spiritual master, or like in a physical form or not. And what I find challenging is when like when people ask me about, oh, so I need to go and find a spiritual master.
Yeah.
And I can share like my experience of feeling guided by Srila Prabhupada. But when it comes to convincing someone, I don't want to convince anyone. And it's the same with God. If someone comes who doesn't have an experience of God and is clear God doesn't exist, then I don't see how any explanation I give, be it as intelligent and whatever, is going to change that person's mind unless they're willing to make an experiment.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'm hearing in your sharing, Anandini, that something in you is feeling pressured, or some sort of should or have to, that you should give more endeavor to convince people, or there's something in you pushing you, but then you don't really want to like go into that convincing, persuading mode.
Yeah, I don't want to go into that, and it's more a question I have, like, is it, I mean, some people maybe really like these arguments and discussions and having, battling with arguments. Maybe
Yes.
that's just my personal thing, that I don't like that. It's more a question, is it possible to convince someone about the existence of God if they just don't experience that, don't believe that, are not open to that?
Well, okay, so I appreciate this discussion we're having, because there's different ways to inspire or present. So one is by personal experience, and sometimes that's the most convincing at certain times for certain people. Just like, yeah, whatever, there's philosophy, this, that, logic, okay, there's the Vedas, I don't know. I just know when I chant Hare Krishna, I'm happy. And so for some, that'll be, wow, that's pretty convincing. I think I'll try it. So there's sharing personal experience. And so I'll give three ways to present. And one is personal experience. And like the first child born into the movement was Sarasvati, daughter of Shyamasundar and Malati. And from the time she's like a toddler, 1.5, 2, there'd be programs and she would just toddle to people. And she would go, chant and be happy. Because she would chant and she was happy. And of course she's a 2-year-old. So Prabhupada would say, that is preaching. And he would really highlight Sarasvati, that she just had such an experience. She chanted Hare Krishna and she's joyful. And of course, if someone hears it from a 2-year-old child, how can they refuse, So there's personal experience. And then let's call it, there's Vedic authority, reference the Vedas, reference Prabhupada. And then there's logic. And for myself, I'll share my personal experience. For myself, I want to cultivate expertise in all 3 ways of communicating. And my experience is that some people, different people resonate and respond to all three ways. I know different people respond to all three ways. So I like any of the principles or practices, I want to be able to share authentically in an inspiring way. Here's my personal experience. And I want to be able to share any aspect of the philosophy based on logic and argument. I want to be able to. Now, for sure, if there's someone who logic and argument is going to be a roadblock, then that would be unintelligent. That would mean that we're not connected with SuperSoul. And I want to be able to communicate any aspect of the principles, practices, or philosophy based on, here's a quote from Prabhupada, here's a verse from Bhagavad Gita. And there are people who they will respect that authority. And so relate to it, yeah, of course, no one will be like convinced until they have an experience. And for many people, not all, but for many, many people, through logic and argument done with care and gentleness, through logic and argument, they might open up. They might open up to going into the laboratory and opening the jar of honey and having an experience. Like I can think of myself, of course, you know, I took 1,000 plates of prasad before I chanted one round of japa over a period of about 3 years. So that opened my heart. But I can say for sure, when in 1981, in my dorm room, or you know, when I was reading Life Comes from Life and reading Prabhupada's arguments about showing the flaws in the theory of evolution and the theory of Big Bang and the theory of life comes from matter. Well, it didn't convince me that God is a blue boy who plays the flute, but it did move me to doubt the different paradigms of thought that I was attached to without even knowing I was attached to it from the time I'm 4 years old. So it got me to cast doubt, and I could see like, hey, this is a new paradigm of thinking. It didn't convince me about God necessarily, but it opened me up to some other paradigms of thought, because the paradigms of thought, modern, secular, humanism, science, I could see Prabhupada in a very logical, rational way. He's just destroying these paradigms of thought very gently, very humbly, but he was just torpedoing, and like that ship couldn't stand. So oftentimes for someone to open up to try the experiment of bhakti, a preliminary step is moving them to question what hasn't been questioned. There's a quote by Mark Twain. He says, "What gets us into trouble is not what we don't know; it's what we know that just ain't so." So through logic and argument, as given by Prabhupada in his books, I opened up. There's so many things that I thought I knew for sure, and just like actually they're not rational, you know. So yeah, there's a place for inspiring people through expert presentation of logic and argument, and then there's a place to inspiring people through expertly prepared samosas, and there's a place to inspiring people through there's a place for inspiring people through beautiful kirtan. So there's definitely a place for logic, and I know sometimes when I'm in groups, the person who might be arguing with me, I know I'm not speaking to him, because I have a sense he might not even be at all open. But there might be another 30 people there, or another 300 people who will maybe hear a recording, and I might be more speaking to them in responding to that person. So what's happening for you, Anandi?
I get more clarity. Yeah, I appreciate your response and making these three differentiations.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, let's take a simple fundamental point. Like, we're not the body, we're spirit, soul. So I can share with someone, like, yeah, since I practice bhakti yoga, and you know, I'm slow on the path, my surrender's not quick, whatever. But since I've had some connection with it for 40 years, I have realization, not a lot, but I have palpable realization that I am this spirit soul, I'm not the body. And that's so liberating and joyful. And I look forward that if I practice another 40 years, 20 or whatever, you know, then and I'm going to get more realization. And that is my personal experience. And you may think I'm crazy, you may think I'm a nut, but that's my personal experience, okay? And then we can do it, okay, the same principle. This is logic. We do this at the beginning of the foundational seminar. We ask people, imagine you're looking at a picture of yourself when you were 5 years old. Now, when you look at that picture, do you say, who is this person? Who is this stranger? You say, no, that's me, that's David, that's Mark, that's Sally, that's Mary when I was 5. Now we know from chemistry, logic, empirical, we know from chemistry that there's not one cell, not one atom in your body now that was there when you were 5. So that indicates logically that this constant identity is something completely non-physical. Call it antimatter, call it soul, call it whatever you want to call it, but that the self is non-physical. That's an empirical proof. So that's logic. It's logic combined. That's the empirical scientific method. Logic combined with experience. And let's say for some people, maybe even the same people, I'll go, for example, it is described in the Bhagavad Gita, Hinosmin yata dehe komaram yovanamjara tata deantara praptir dirastatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continually passes from childhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at the time of death. So that's Bhagavad Gita. That's the authority on transmigration and reincarnation. So I'm citing Vedic authority. Shariram yadavatnoti yachapyutkamani shram grihit vetani samyati vairaganan ibashaya. As the embodied soul continues, the soul carries conceptions from one body to the other as the air carries aromas. Okay. So that, and I can say, like, even people who didn't grow up in India, didn't grow up with the Vedas, I've often heard that people hear those verses quoted and they get, oh, this isn't just some hippie new age thing that came on, that started in the 1960s. That like it moves them to take this seriously. So we can do that for any point, whether it's chanting or karma or whatever. So we did that for the idea that we are eternal spirits, so we're not the body. We share personal experience. We showed how it makes sense according to logic and rationality, and we cited Vedic authority. And so I want to cultivate expertise on any point of the practice, philosophy, or principles to be able to communicate based on personal experience, Vedic authority, and logic. Thank you, Anandini.
Thank you.
All right.
And it's true, I feel this should. And it's like something I have built into my psychology. Whenever I feel an inspiration to do something, then at one point this program starts which goes, oh, you should. And then I rebel against it. So I got understanding about that too. Thank you.
That understanding about yourself and the way you work in that. Bhakti Keith.
Yeah, I was appreciating the example that he gave of Prabhupada asking him what he wanted,
Yep.
And I really, really value that a lot. And I've seen how it can be where that the other mentality are saying, like, you must listen to me and all that. And I can see how that's like, it is. I mean, obviously, probably I did give people direct instructions, like, here, you get off the train and tear the temple here, But I feel like those people, they were ready for, that's what they wanted. Like, tell me anything, So that's where they were at. And I had the experience where people just take that mood of just
trying to imitate Prabhupada.
Yeah, you have to listen to me, and it's all about. And it's really like a violence, it's really painful and really a hindrance on the spiritual path. And it's not like it's putting the institution, it's like putting the caste consciousness and putting all of the religion above the advancement.
Above the relationship.
Yeah, above the relationship. Yeah, and that's a very painful experience. And yeah, I heard this nice quote before about how they have like an egg, and then if for the egg to be opened, if it comes from the outside, that means death. But if it comes from the inside, that means life.
Nice.
And I was trying to meditate on this, of what that means for somebody who's like a teacher, right? Like how they just maybe create the best circumstance for that to happen, like an incubator or something like that, you know? And
yeah, there's a quote from Einstein, something like Einstein said, I never teach my pupils, I simply create the conditions in which they can learn.
Yeah, and I really value that and want to move in that direction. But I've noticed that this propensity to, like, because I want to be bold in that. I want to be completely unhindered and forthright in these things. I don't want to hold back. If I'm trying to help somebody or guide them or give some, just basically, yeah, that's part of I want to give them, look inside of me and give them the best that I have to offer, whatever that looks like. But it's this impulse to want to tweak people or trick them into accepting what I'm saying or whatever. It's so subtle and so sometimes can be so tricky to distinguish. So could you?
Yeah, Prabhupada emphasizes that Krishna consciousness it's pure and clean. We don't need any tricks. We don't need any tricks. I mean, you know, there is transcendental trickery, like Prabhupada would say, prasadam is our secret weapon. Okay, like that. And so, but Prabhupada says that we don't need any tricks. There doesn't need to be any manipulation. We just, this Krishna consciousness, it's pure, it's clean, it makes sense, and it's
already there.
It's already there, and it just speaks to the heart. So it's just our opportunity to be pure and share purely. Thank you.
Hearing your exchange, I was thinking, well, does it, like, can we say in a sense that we don't need a spiritual master?
Well, you know, from the conditioned state, you know, we tend to have blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to have blind spots. So, you know, like, you know, I'll have a tendency to think that ugly weeds in my garden are actually flowers, and to think that the pure voice of SuperSoul, the voice of my twisted agenda ego. So to come to, you know, Krishna describes Tadviganartam Sagumeva Abhikacha. If we actually want to come out of conditioned life, yeah, we need a teacher, you know. We need to, just like in any, let's say, let's say if someone wants to become an expert surgeon or a top-notch quantum physicist, and it was like, well, I'll do it without a teacher, without books. Well, no, you're not going to make it, you know. So similarly, it's kind of foolishness to think like, I don't need a teacher, I'll just go. No, because the idea is I'm in ignorance. I'm in ignorance. So to come out of ignorance, I need someone, like my hands and legs are tied. So, and if your hands and legs are tied, we can't help each other. So we need someone who's truly liberated to untie us, or to help us untie us. So yeah, so to master this science of self-realization, Krishna consciousness, yeah, of course we need a spiritual master. We need a teacher. We need someone who's expert. Otherwise, We'll just flounder around and maybe get cheated and cheat others in the name of spiritual life. Like that. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for joining. Evening, there's a nectar devotion reading. Everyone is invited to come. Hare Krishna.